If Derek Carr wants out of New Orleans this badly, then maybe the Saints should have moved on the first time that he asked. We got all that and a little bit of land yap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Aaron Rodgers might be logical for 2025, but he might not bring the team much success. Two potential trade partners if Derek Carr does indeed want out of New Orleans, and it sounds like the league believes that that's exactly what he wants. We got all that and much more for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much as always, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The conversation has turned when it comes to Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. What was originally looked at as a potential season-threatening right shoulder, throwing shoulder injury is now turning into a potential leverage play to get out of New Orleans. And this is one of those situations where when there's smoke, there's fire. I want to credit Diana Rossini over at The Athletic, as well as Chase Daniel. Two of them on the Scoop City podcast were talking about this. And I want to be really clear. This isn't Diana Rossini giving you her opinion, right? This is Diana Rossini saying that people around the league are saying what I'm about to say, which is that she can't find anybody in the league that's openly willing to say that Derek Carr definitely has a shoulder injury that is causing him a lot of problems. It could potentially cost him the 2025 season. And instead, she's finding a lot of people around the league who are saying, you know what this is, you've been in this business for a long time, it's trade bait. So it's an opportunity for Derek Carr to force his way out of New Orleans, which now is becoming the running belief in terms of what's going on around what is a strange situation here in New Orleans. Silence when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, Carr reviews when it comes to Derek Carr. That's the amount of acknowledgement that we're seeing from the two parties that are actually engaged in this, which makes sense. The New Orleans Saints have no reason to come out and say anything publicly. Derek Carr and his team have no reason to come out and say anything publicly. Anything that they do is going to come through the media more than likely. And then that's where everything is going to go. And then we'll see where things actually end up. When things actually end up somewhere, we're not going to see the process that's going on behind the closed doors. But it is very interesting. It is so hard to get anyone to say anything about any of this. But it is interesting because it's clear that the NFL believes that this is Derek Carr simply trying to push his way out of New Orleans. You remember back on March 9th, we did a show here where we talked about the Jeremy Fowler report from ESPN that the Saints and Derek Carr, or that Derek Carr was willing to test the market, right? Was willing to see what other opportunities were out there for him and stuff like that. And then that would have been before the contract eventually got restructured, which was on March 8th. So we were reporting back to things that had gone on throughout those conversations. And the Saints made the decision to restructure him, keep him here in New Orleans. I made the argument at that time on that show on March 9th that if Derek Carr wanted out of New Orleans, then the New Orleans Saints should have happily obliged. Not because I think that the Saints would be better with Derek Carr. I didn't think they were going to be very good with Derek Carr in 2025. You got a new offensive system, a new defensive system, an entirely new coaching staff. You didn't know exactly what direction things were going to go, yada, 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 right? A lot of question marks. So my kind of outlook for the New Orleans Saints was as a 6 or 7 win team. I think you get more wins because you have a better coach than you had in Dennis Allen. But now I don't think that you're in a place where you're all of a sudden competing to win the division. Unless the division is awful, then maybe you are competing by the end of the season with a 7-10 record. But the reason why I thought that the Saints and Derek Carr should move on wasn't because I thought that moving on from Derek Carr was going to immediately make the team any better. The team has a lot of things that it has to fix. But the fact of the matter is that it was so clear that these two needed a split. Opportunity for you with a new head coach, a new coaching staff, new leadership to take a new direction. And you're not going to take that new direction with an end of career quarterback. You're not going to be able to do that. So bring in somebody that's young, that's feisty, that is able to potentially turn into your future at the quarterback position. We'll see if the New Orleans Saints end up doing that now moving forward, either because Derek Carr misses the 2025 season due to injury or because he ends up on another team by the time that this is all said and done. Here's my belief, my take. This is pure speculation. This isn't me reporting anything, but if I'm trying to fill the dots, right, with everything that we know, which is that Carr wanted out, Saints restructured his contract, Carr all of a sudden has this injury that no one's really confirming anywhere, and now all of a sudden, there's this conversation around Derek Carr might just want out. So here's what I think the timeline could potentially look like. Carr probably wanted out at the beginning of the offseason, right? Never really embraced the city, didn't find the success that he was looking for in the city, has dealt with nothing but injury, or dealt with a lot of injuries since he arrived here in the city. Only 27 games of his 34 he would have been available for, all those other things. Wasn't finding the success, all this other stuff. And let's be real, the majority of Saints fans not really vibing with Derek Carr. And Derek Carr never really felt like he was vibing with the city in return. Right after the offseason, he moved back quickly to the West Coast, all these other things. So Carr, I think, wanted out at the very beginning of the offseason. That's my read on the situation, not me reporting that. But that's my read on the situation. The Saints, though, did not oblige with that. The Saints wanted to roll with Derek Carr. Kellen Moore came in to New Orleans, accepting the head coach position with the understanding that Derek Carr was going to be the quarterback for at least 2025, and then maybe move on and figure stuff out in 2026. But I do think that the Saints were interested in drafting a quarterback during this offseason, one way or another. I do think that there's genuine interest in this year's quarterback class from Kellen Moore and from this New Orleans Saints coaching staff. That doesn't mean number 9. That could mean later. So what I mean to say, and the reason why I lay those out in the timeline, is that I think Derek Carr wanted out before Kellen Moore even arrived in New Orleans, before there was ever any talk of the Saints drafting a quarterback, all these other things. You just look at the demeanor, right? Saints didn't oblige. They ended up restructuring him. So now he remains here in New Orleans, despite making it known reportedly to the New Orleans Saints that he was willing to test and find other opportunities. That would mean that he wouldn't want the restructure, wouldn't want to stick around in New Orleans. Saints restructure his deal. Then the injury becomes leaked, I believe, and a lot of people believe, by Derek Carr's team. I thought maybe it was because there were going to be photos and stuff like that at the offseason workouts. It was going to be clear that Derek Carr wasn't present at the offseason workouts, and that leaking that information on Friday before the offseason workouts on Monday gave an excuse for why Derek Carr wasn't there. What it could also mean is that it becomes an excuse that the Saints now get to use, and that Derek Carr has created for the Saints to go out there and find their next quarterback. If they go out there and draft a quarterback this offseason, all of a sudden, or roll with their next quarterback, right? They're prepared. They have what they want for their quarterback situation going into 2025. Then Derek Carr is cleared and good to go. But you've got your quarterback. You have your way to move. Go ahead and get me out of here. And then he ends up traded after June 1st. That's my read on the situation. Is that going to be the case? I don't know. It gets a little cloudy around the why say you have a shoulder injury that threatens your availability in 2025 if you want to be moved to another team. I don't know if exacerbating that injury, which we believe is connected to the AC joint sprain from back in the Green Bay Packers game back in 2023. I don't know how that makes your market better, but could be the way that they go. So those are that's kind of the timeline that I could see making sense that would lead to Derek Carr being moved. Now, if Derek Carr was going to be moved, it would have to happen after June 1st, because that's the only way salary cap wise the Saints are going to be able to stomach this. Could explain why they're hanging on to all the salary cap money as well, so that they can move some of that over into 2026 to help to absorb what's going to push up into 2026. So that's a timeline. Now let's hit the highlights, and I'm going to give you 2 teams, the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, that could absolutely be in on a trade depending on how the draft goes for each of those teams. We got that coming up for you next. We continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. If you're a small business owner, you know that your job does not stop when you clock out at 5. And that's where LinkedIn can really be helpful, because it'll take some of that extra work off of your plate so that when you clock out, LinkedIn can clock in, do different things like get your job postings out in front of the greatly qualified candidates all over that expansive LinkedIn network, help you write job descriptions for those job openings as well, so you're not doing all of this all on your lonesome. And they even give you a couple of pro tips, like bringing up that hashtag hiring frame on your LinkedIn profile to let everybody know that your business is looking for potential candidates just like them. If you could be someone else's dream job, LinkedIn is going to let them know that your job is available. And here's the best part. They'll do it all for free. Head over to linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr's time together could be coming to a messy end very soon. I don't think that we've heard anything near the end of this whole situation. But what the end of this situation looks like is debatable. We'll see exactly which way the New Orleans Saints go with all of this. They could potentially look to simply move on from Derek Carr by designating him as a post-June 1 cut. They can do that. They haven't designated anyone with such a tag at this point. That would help them in a situation to where they can, push some of the dead cap into next year. It's going to end up costing them a lot of money. This year pushes around $40 or so million of dead cap into next year. But maybe that's why the Saints are stockpiling dead money or stockpiling money right now, because they have the ability to be able to potentially push some of that or roll some of that over into next year to help chew away at a little bit of the overages that they'll experience once they do that. Additionally, they could look to trade him. If they traded him, it would move an additional $1.255 million away from the New Orleans Saints books and over to the team that receives him, but then otherwise has a similar effect, right? $19 million of dead cap this year, around $50 million of dead cap next year. You're still looking to roll some of that money over in order to be able to help you sustain that cap hit or that additional acceleration of funds into next year. So they've got a couple of options here in terms of how they did it. If they were to designate him as a post-June 1 cut, he would become available immediately. If they wanted to trade him post-June 1, they would literally have to wait until after June 1st in order to trade him. I think trading him would be the best way to go. Save yourself a little bit of extra money this year. Send him somewhere. Get something in return. Like, you might as well get something out of this tumultuous situation if you're the New Orleans Saints. So there are two candidates that I think could be there for New Orleans. That's the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But all that's going to be contingent upon what happens for the rest of this offseason and in the NFL draft. Let's look at the Cleveland Browns. They select number 2 overall in this year's draft, as well as number 34 overall in this year's draft, the second pick in each of the first and second rounds. Those are prime positions for quarterbacks in this year's class. At number 2, if they don't go with Shedeur Sanders, are they really going to roll ahead with Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett and feel really good? That's an uninspiring quarterback room, to say the least. So they could do something like draft Abdul Carter, the edge rusher out of Penn State, at number 2, or the versatile athlete wide receiver / corner Travis Hunter out of Colorado. They could take him at number 2 and then look to trade up from 34 into the bottom part of the draft, of the first round, in order to grab another quarterback, a Jackson Dart, a Tyler Shuck if they really like him, a Jalen Milroe if they really like him, somebody like that would be there in that bottom portion of the first round. Now, they could also try to trade into the middle of the first round and get, 2 early first round picks, a la the Houston Texans years ago, where they drafted not only CJ Stroud, but they also got up again and drafted Will Anderson. But they had a lot more, draft capital to work with and all these other things. Maybe Cleveland could do that, but they're still reeling a little bit from what they gave up to get Deshaun Watson. Now, I will say that if the Cleveland Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, I don't think that would preclude them from being interested in Derek Carr, but I'm going to come back around to that. I want to take a look at the Steelers real quick, who pick at number 21 in this year's draft class. Or this year's first round. At 21, they could potentially go with Jackson Dart. The Jackson Dart aesthetic, I think, would look great in black and yellow. But they could go Jackson Dart. They could go Jalen Milroe at that point. They could look to trade up. Shedeur Sanders could fall to them at 21. It doesn't seem like the NFL is super, super high on Shedeur Sanders, but it depends on who you're talking to, right? And so we'll see exactly where things go with all that. But either of those cases, the big thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers is, do they land Aaron Rodgers this offseason? Which then becomes really interesting because the Saints can all of a sudden become a player for Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that they should, but they could. So let's say that the New Orleans Saints end up actually stealing Aaron Rodgers in free agency. And then all of a sudden, the Steelers are going, oh, okay, well, there went that plan. Now we need another veteran quarterback to turn to while we also draft a quarterback that could effectively be the bridge to that younger quarterback. Now, I don't think that investing in this year's quarterback draft class would put Derek Carr in a situation where he would say, no, I don't want to go there. And here's why. One of the reasons why I so specifically laid out the timeline that I presume is going on for New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr with a little bit of information that we have on this is because a part of my presumption is that Derek Carr did not ask to be traded because the New Orleans Saints were going to be looking for quarterbacks. Derek Carr was looking to be traded well before that. Here's why I think that. Think about the timeline of the last time that you didn't see Derek Carr and it meant something, right? Everyone was like a little upset or really upset that he wasn't around during the Super Bowl when New Orleans was hosted a Super Bowl. Doing Super Bowl Radio Row, all the other stuff. Everybody's just going to be asking about your future, whatever. Didn't see him at Mardi Gras. Derek Carr does not strike me as a Mardi Gras guy. Let me just be real. And then the thing that was most important, in my opinion, in terms of Derek Carr's offseason silence until his Carr review, was really when Kellen Moore was hired. Kellen Moore was hired, and Eric McCoy greeted him at the facility. Now, Eric McCoy is one of the leaders of this team. He's an emotional leader. He's a leader on the field. He's one of the team's best players. He's one of the best players at his position in the NFL. I'm not down talking Eric McCoy as if him being there was an absurd thing. What I'm saying is that Derek Carr not being there was absurd. And so for me, before all the offseason work on the quarterbacks and Kellen Moore going to Oxford to watch Jackson Dart and Scott Tolzien going and doing personal workouts or private workouts with Kyle McCord and the team visiting with all these quarterbacks, this, that, and the other, and Scott Tolzien going to Colorado's pro day, yada, 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 so on and so forth. That all happened after I think Derek Carr decided that he wanted out of New Orleans, because why wasn't Derek Carr present when Kellen Moore was around? And this would be, and I'm talking about before Kellen Moore's introductory press conference where he didn't commit to Derek Carr, which probably even furthered or drove a wedge in terms of what Derek Carr was feeling at that point. And so if the reason that Derek Carr wants out of New Orleans is not because the New Orleans Saints are looking at this quarterback class very seriously, then I don't think that other teams looking at the quarterback class very seriously is going to be a deterring factor for Derek Carr to potentially land somewhere. So even if the Cleveland Browns pass on Shedeur Sanders at 2, but then draft Jackson Dart at 34 or move up, even if the Pittsburgh Steelers take Jackson Dart at 21 or Shedeur Sanders at 21 or some other quarterback, I don't think that that's going to preclude Derek Carr from being an option for those teams, nor do I think it's going to preclude those teams from being an option for Derek Carr, because I don't think that's the deciding factor here in New Orleans. I think Derek Carr simply wants out of New Orleans if he's willing to go to these lengths to push his way out. If these are the lengths that you're willing to go to get out, it doesn't have to do with what that team is interested in beyond you. It has to do with your fit with the team, your fit with the organization, your fit with the community, your fit with blah, 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 whatever. Like, it's about you. It's not about what they're doing. It's about you. And so if you're pushing this far, then I don't think that teams like the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, unless one of them lands Aaron Rodgers, wouldn't be a logical spot for Derek Carr. So that's why I put those two teams out there, even if they do invest in young quarterbacks in this year's NFL draft. And if the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't land Aaron Rodgers, that could send Aaron Rodgers elsewhere, and New Orleans could be one of those destinations. But I don't think that the New Orleans Saints are ready for Aaron Rodgers. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NBA playoffs are almost here. We got the play-ins going on, all that good stuff. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. It's all you got to do is win your first $5 bet, and that's $250 that you could then use on things like betting on your favorite team, to different player props. You can even get in on live betting and same game parlays for even bigger payouts. There's a ton for you to check out over at FanDuel today. Tonight, you got the Sacramento Kings 4.5 point favorites over the Dallas Mavericks, or what's left of them. I think you can probably go in and put a little bit on that money line when it comes to the Sacramento Kings. Maybe a good spot for your first bet when it comes to your first $5. So you can get that $250 in bonus bet. So don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your chance for $250 in bonus bets today. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints may be a logical landing spot for quarterback Aaron Rodgers in free agency, who's still kind of awaiting his decision to see where things might go and all that. But I don't think that the Saints are quite ready for that situation. Like, coming out of the tumultuous situation here with Derek Carr, if the two indeed do part ways, and if this doesn't turn out to just simply be a shoulder injury that, cans his 2025 season, I don't think that going from that into the spectacle of Aaron Rodgers is going to be something that the New Orleans Saints are built to handle. I don't think that the Saints can handle Aaron Rodgers. I'm just going to be very, very honest. I think that this is a team with a first-time head coach, an all-new coaching staff, a salary cap situation that's going to be completely sunken by this Derek Carr situation. They'll be able to get past it. It'll be okay. Salary cap goes up every year. They've got money to roll over. It'll all end up fine salary cap-wise, but man, it just has like this big hit on you that you spent $40 million this year on a quarterback that's probably not going to be on your team, or that's not going to play for you, one of the two. To come out of that, to go for a guy that has proven to be one of the most high maintenance players in the NFL, that wants things done a very specific way, and typically when he gets that way still doesn't find success here in the latter point of his career. That type of player that is so enigmatic, that is so tough to connect with for his teammates, that is so tough to sell PR-wise, all these other things publicly. That's a really, really tough situation for the New Orleans Saints to step into. And while I think that a really strong head coach like Mike Tomlin over with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who has dealt with, like Antonio Brown was mostly normal when he was around Mike Tomlin, right? Like, they kept that so under wraps, right? Mike Tomlin has dealt with everything, right? People forget the backstory behind Ben Roethlisberger because of how good he was with Mike Tomlin and the things I'm sure that Mike Tomlin did to subside all the noise, right? George Pickens right now is somebody that everybody's kind of going like, oh, what's going on? Like, he seems like a ticking time bomb. What's going to happen there? And Mike Tomlin's mostly kept him in check. Mike Tomlin has done a lot of the personality management stuff that no other coach in the NFL can do outside of maybe Sean Payton. But here's the deal. 36-year-old first-time head coach, youngest head coach in the league right now, Kellen Moore, is not Mike Tomlin. And I'm not even trying to cast aspersions at Kellen Moore. I've spoken with Kellen Moore. I like Kellen Moore. I think Kellen Moore is going to be a pretty good head coach. But I still don't know that he's the guy that's going to get in Aaron Rodgers' face and tell him to sit down. I still don't know if he's going to be the guy to get in Aaron Rodgers' face and say, hey, buddy, you don't get what you want here. You get what you have. Now go win football games with it. I don't know that he's going to be that guy. And so for that reason, I don't think that the New Orleans Saints should pursue Aaron Rodgers. Or I guess I should say I don't think that they should land Aaron Rodgers. This organization is on the brink of what feels like so much turmoil already, right? You got a quarterback right now that's forcing his way out, apparently. If not, then you have a quarterback that has a shoulder injury that you just found out because his team probably put it out is going to end his season. Like, there was a report that I think it was Ian Rappaport from NFL Network who said something along the lines of like, it was a surprise to many Saints players and everything. But the Saints themselves have known about it for some time. And so it's an interesting situation all in its own, but it's a tumultuous one. It's a very tumultuous situation. You just fired your head coach midseason. You went through a whole coaching search and everything like that. Like, this is not the time. This is the time to be searching for stability, not to be potentially welcoming chaos. And I'm not putting a chaos tag on Aaron Rodgers. I'm putting a chaos tag on Aaron Rodgers in this environment would be my concern. Like, unless Aaron Rodgers is going to come in ready to play, the father figure role for everybody, but then doesn't that kind of Doesn't that kind of put a shadow over your first-time head coach, your young head coach? Like, so many questions would get asked about that. Are the Saints really welcoming that into their building? I'm kind of making the same argument that I made when the Saints were pursuing Deshaun Watson. I don't think you want those distractions. I don't think you want that heat. And I think the same when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. Now, if Aaron Rodgers ends up becoming the quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, we'll see where things go. But boy, there's going to need to be concessions and all these other things made. I think Aaron Rodgers with the Pittsburgh Steelers is a different conversation than Aaron Rodgers with the New Orleans Saints, right? And of course, Aaron could be actually waiting not to sign with the New Orleans Saints because of this quarterback injury, but maybe the holdup with the Pittsburgh Steelers is that Aaron Rodgers wants to wait and see what happens with Minnesota to finish kind of his, everybody calls it like the Derek Carr track, or not the Derek Carr track, but the Brett Favre track, where he actually started with the Atlanta Falcons, by the way. It didn't actually start with the Green Bay Packers, but when Green Bay Packers spent the majority of his career with the Green Bay Packers, then he went to the New York Jets, then he went to the Minnesota Vikings. Some believe that for whatever reason, Aaron Rodgers wants to do the same thing. I don't buy that. And so, I do think that the Saints are an actual option in this situation. I just don't know that they're equipped to handle it, right? This is a locker room full of guys that say, I'm not really a rah-rah guy, instead of a locker room full of strong personalities that are leaders. And I don't know if the adding Aaron Rodgers to a locker room without a bunch of strong vocal leaders is really going to play well. Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, Tyrann Mathieu, of course, the exceptions, vocal leaders, vocal guys. But over on that offensive side, you got a lot of guys that just kind of put their hands up and go, I'm not really a rah-rah guy. You know what I mean? And so is that really the environment that's conducive when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. You know what I mean? I just don't know. And so we'll see where things go, but I'm not sure that that's going to be the best option for the New Orleans Saints. What would be the best option for the New Orleans Saints, Ross? I'm glad you asked. For me, I think turning the page with another young quarterback that can be your future, as opposed to a twilight of career player, is a better option for New Orleans. Because then you get the opportunity not just to try to come out and compete in 2025, which would be what an Aaron Rodgers signing would be. In the short term, you're building towards some long-term sustainable success if that quarterback pans out. So you could test out one of your young quarterbacks that you have in the building right now, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener. You can, let's be honest, the real piece of that conversation is around Spencer Rattler. I think we've seen what the New Orleans Saints organization believes in or thinks about Jake Haener at this point. And then, of course, you have this year's draft class. And in either case, investing in one of those does not preclude you from, if things go poorly in 2025, to taking another quarterback in 2026. And then if you're out of the range to take a quarterback in 2026, then you've got two options. Maybe you use your draft capital this year to really benefit your team around the quarterback position, which gives you the flexibility that you need to be able to trade up next year to be able to go and get that quarterback to put in your situation. Or you're not in the range because something worked in 2025. And I think that bringing in a veteran quarterback is more than likely going to put you right back at that 7-8 win range, 6-7 win range. That's going to just put you in this awkward middle of the pack outside the top 10 potentially next year. And that would almost be the worst case scenario for New Orleans, because then they spent a year with a rookie quarterback. They learned nothing about the young quarterbacks in their building. They didn't invest in a young quarterback in this year's draft. Even if they drafted one, they didn't give them the reps. And you're outside of the range to go and get yourself comfortably a quarterback for next year. And you might have spent draft capital this year to go and get a quarterback that you still haven't put out on the field. I don't think that's the best route to go. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, I want to keep up this conversation. What are the highlights around all of this and what it could mean for the New Orleans Saints moving forward? We're going to break all of that down in tomorrow's episode. We appreciate you very much. I really, really hope that you go and check out Locked On Pelicans. Jake Madison, phenomenal show covering the Joe Dumars hire, what's going on with the New Orleans Pelicans, and where things could be headed with head coach Willie Green, and much more. You can find all of that over at Locked On Pelicans. Go and check him out today. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.